So Steve, take us back before real estate. What were you doing, and how did we get here at the table today?
You know, I probably had 26 different odd jobs. I moved from upstate New York to Arizona to go to Arizona State University. And I was putting myself through school, making $1.65 an hour, trying to get in-state tuition rates and afford tuition. And so somebody said to me, by the way, requirements changed and I had to spend another year in school to get my degree. It was in transportation distribution management. I thought I wanted to be in management at UPS because that's what I did in New York.
Okay.
And somebody said to me, you ought to get in real estate. And I said, really, what do you have to do? I was looking for some alternative, and that's what somebody said. I went to real estate school, sold a house my second day, sold another house the next week, another house the next week. This was just like the easiest thing in the world, is what I thought. And then in the Jimmy Carter years, when the interest rates went to 18%, it wasn't so easy anymore.
18%.
Yeah.
Park there, listeners. 18%. 6%'s not high.
Right.
Right.
So we had learned skills like helping sellers carry their own paper and merging first and second mortgages, figuring out what the blended rate was, making housing affordable for people when the traditional mortgage process didn't make it affordable for people. And so did extremely well. Sold, I was $1 million producer all through those years, multi-million-dollar producer all through those years.
And when you say multi-million-dollar producer, we're not talking multi-million in volume like sometimes agents like to talk about today. I mean, we're talking multi-million in actual commissions, right?
Well, it starts out with volume, right? Because that's what the industry was teaching us. Focus on the volume, right? And then making actual commissions is the second part. And yes, I got to more than a million. 1.2 was my best year. And sold 243 properties that year.
Wow.
And it was just, and we were cooking with gas. But we were looking at, in that case, it's like building a business as opposed to being an agent. And so different mindset. Most people get in this business with the independent contractor mindset, right? Which is, I'm going to do it. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm going to do this all by myself, yada, yada, yada. Some people go in and say, I had to work in a corporation. I had to be responsible for people. I'll never have that happen again, which is antithetical to growth.
Now, I'm curious about that. Is there a certain point in an agent's progression in their career where they should start to think like a business owner, where you thought to yourself, this is where it needs to happen? Or should they be would you be encouraging them to be having that mindset and that perspective right from day one in real estate before they even had their first sale?
I think that's the difference in the evolution. So I'm 45 years in this business now. And so the evolution of the real estate business, specifically after the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book came in, was you should start with this right away. You should have this mindset of this is where I'm going. Because in the MREA book, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, there's the 7 levels of where you can go to. And it starts with level 1, which is just you. It goes to level 7. And it's like, we're going to choose to go in this path. And then here's how you get there. It's the minute somebody comes in and says, I'm going to do it, even Michael Jordan couldn't win a championship without the other guys on the team. It takes, nobody succeeds alone.
100%. And it makes me think of Stephen Covey when he says begin with the end in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I have to ask, did you then begin with that end in mind? I mean, I picked up on the fact that when someone said you should get into real estate, you basically took the, humble approach of saying, how do I do that? Or let me know how. Right. And you got in. Were you asking those same type of questions early in your career of let me know how, let me figure this out? Or were you like, oh no, I'm just going to go do this on my own and figure it out?
No, it was, I went through, he talked about Stephen Covey, and he talks about dependent to independent to interdependent being the maturity continuum. And I started out dependent, moved to independent, and then found interdependence, went through that whole process. And at the very beginning, I had a broker who was my mentor who taught me how to evaluate investments, who taught me how to understand return on investment, who taught me how to understand how to help people invest. And so I told you I came from New York, right? It's a declining population with a slow economy in northern New York where I came from. Come to Arizona, property values are going up like crazy. Now I'm talking the 1970s, same thing's happening today, right? And so I called back to, my sphere of influence was back in New York. And I called back there And I said, you can't believe what's happening out here. You should be investing. And so my friends, my dad, my grandfather, my family, and some of those stories are in my book, Hold. They all said, okay. And so I got started by helping other people build wealth. And in doing that, got the idea that I'm not just an agent to help somebody buy a house or sell a house. I'm here to help you buy your first one. How quickly can we get the next one? How quickly can we get the next one? And then when I learned about the tax laws and how the tax laws influenced everything, and we might get to this because in the mid-'80s, they changed the tax laws, and I was this close to bankruptcy. I had lost everything, was 3 payments down on my house when Congress changed the tax laws. But so tax laws affect a lot.
Well, that's actually something that's really relevant. I mean, right now in our brokerage, I'm taking a group of people through Tom Wheelwright's book, Tax-Free Wealth, and we're talking about that. And in the beginning of that book, he actually mentions how tax reform happens about, every 30 years or so. And I think last time, around 2017. So that we backtracked then into the 80s. What happened there that actually kept you from bankruptcy? Can you actually share that?
Well, determination was the answer. So in 1986, Congress changed the tax laws, and they called it the Tax Equity Fairness Reform Act, TEFRA, right? And when they did that, they decided, or they determined that you now make 2 different types of income, passive and active income. And that if you lose money in your passive side, you can't write it off against the active side. And we've been living with that ever since. Well, prior to that, everybody made investment decisions based on what the taxes allowed. And that, we saw in Arizona, that bankrupted the savings and loan industry. That bankrupted a ton of different people and people that were making investments. I mean, can you imagine the Phoenician Resort or Superstition Springs Mall going into foreclosure? Because, so it affected the entire industry here. We couldn't get mortgages.
Let me circle back to something you said a moment ago about how you moved to Arizona, but then you called your sphere of influence back in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Because I hear from agents so often that they know people out of state. And so I want to just ask you a little bit about how you went about that, being in another state, being licensed across the country. How did you approach that conversation? And it sounds like, in part, it was based on the idea of coming from contribution, and that you were sharing them the educational process of how and why they should be investing.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious if this is still an avenue you would recommend to an existing agent in today's market.
Oh, 100%. In fact, the script that I used for my database and all of my sphere of influence from the 80s all the way through till today is a very simple script. It is as part of my job, I'm looking at properties every day. And from time to time, I run across a really good opportunity, a really good investment, a really good deal. That's what everybody's looking for. So from time to time, I run across a really good deal. So when I run across a real estate opportunity, would you be interested in knowing about it?
Yeah.
And then your yes means I'm flagging you in my database as interested in investment opportunities. So now what's my role? My role is to bring you opportunities. That's what I did with the people in New York.
Right.
And I said, their environment was a contracting environment, and I moved to this expanding environment, and I'm like, let me just share the opportunities with you and it was an easy conversation there.
And how important in that conversation, if they say yes, is then the educational piece? Your average everyday consumer may not understand the intricacies of investing in real estate. Everybody wants a good deal, though, like you said.
Right.
So how do you bridge that gap?
Well, so that's actually the premise for my company. Right. So I have a company called TCT Property Services, and we call ourselves the resource for people building wealth with real estate. Right. Well, how do you do that? What are the 3 pillars of that? Number 1 is education, because people need to know what to do. Number 2 is information, so people know what's actually going on. And then the third part is services. So whether you're in real estate sales, selling houses, or whether you're helping people manage their assets and building wealth with real estate, it's the same thing: education, information, and services.
So you mentioned briefly, and this is kind of what we're talking about so far, that you kind of transform from an agent that serves to a business owner who is serving. And when we were off air, I believe you referenced like an insurance agent or something, and I'm just curious how that works together, that story.
So the environment you're in matters, right? It took me over 20 years to make that evolution, Today, I would suggest you do it year one. And we didn't have real estate teams. We didn't know about how to leverage. We didn't have the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, which is, quite frankly, it's the model. Here's what the top people were doing, and if you want to do it, you could do it too. So I'm in this environment, independent environment, 100% commission company, and my insurance agent was a State Farm agent. And after 6 years, she had opened her, and State Farm came to her and said, you know what, we're going to pay you for your book of business, and we want to give you remember this is in the 80s, we want to give you a 6-figure salary to go to Tempe and teach other people how to do what you've just done. And I'm looking at my business and I'm going, number one, who would pay me for this business? And the answer was nobody, right? Wouldn't even think about it. The idea that you would have a real estate practice that was be saleable, no, it was the real estate company you work for that developed equity, that developed value, not your individual business. Well, that's all transitioned now. That's changed. So I'm sharing with you that person caused that flash in my mind of, well, wait a minute, I'm not building equity in anything here. I'm just making cash flow by helping people buy and sell properties. And I was really good at it. I was the number 4 agent in the Phoenix market. And so in the top 1%, I was really good at that. But I'm looking and going, I'm not building equity in anything.
So how did this sort of realization then inform your next steps?
Well, so I started being on purpose instead of just helping my clients with managing their assets and their investment properties. I was on purpose about saying, you know what, I'll help your clients too. And so I started building a property management portfolio till I got up to 80 properties, and it was like I was trying to figure out how to get out.
So take us back then into some of the lessons that you learned in the build phase of that. As you're acquiring property and you're having this mindset transition, like what were some of the struggles that you really went through?
So looking back on it, it's all about vision. So how big is your vision? So you have interviewed my co-author in the book, Hold Janice Doty. And quite frankly, I was at the point where I was trying to get out of the business because my vision wasn't big enough for it. And I didn't know how to apply leverage to the business. It wasn't something that you talked about in the real estate business. In fact, at the company that I was, when I hired my first assistant, they had to change their business model to accommodate an assistant for a real estate agent. So my vision wasn't big enough, and she actually forced me to hire her, is the way I always joke about it, right? And we went from, so my mindset was these 80 properties that I'm managing right now are keeping me from selling more properties. They're driving me crazy, and I need to just get out. And then she helped me grow it to 250 properties. We're at 600 houses right now, plus a commercial portfolio. And so I guess my answer to your question is, the first thing that I learned was my vision was too small. The second thing that I learned was that it requires leverage. And so I have to move from I do it to we do it. And my thought process has to be about that. And ultimately to they do it. I move from I do it to we do it. And then there's a mindset about we do it too, because we do it means I'm responsible that those other individuals reach their goals in life. They're not here to help me. We're here to move forward together. And I watch lots and lots of real estate agents lose their leverage, their assistance, their support, because their mindset was, you're here to help me achieve my goals, as opposed to the other way around.
Right. And the other thing that we talk about a lot with what you're describing around I do it, we do it, is sometimes those high performing individuals have a hard time letting go of those different pieces of the job, because they believe that they can do it the best, better than anybody else. And that holding on to those tasks actually prevent them, as you're describing, from moving on and reaching the next highest level of their career.
Right. You're describing me.
So what advice do you have? How does somebody who's in that position sort of navigate that and start being more willing to let go of pieces of the job so that they can grow?
So let's go back to vision again. If you don't have a vision for what your organizational chart's going to look like, you think it's all about you. Your vision is internal. And so when I'm just going to go back to the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, but creating an organizational chart saying, here's where I want to go, and this is what I'm going to need in place in order to make that happen. And so now we're not talking about the what anymore. We're talking about the who, and who can I get? And the other thing that I've many, many times in my career now I have experienced is that talent comes to a compelling vision. It's not the job description. It's not the money. It's not the salary. Non-talent comes to that. Talent comes to a big opportunity, a compelling vision. And I had one lady that hired to run my team who left a $120,000 a year job, and this was in the 90s, $120,000 a year job. I thought I could only afford to pay her $60,000. She took it because she said, I want to make that vision happen. And that's where the team model came out of MREA. I'm pointing up here at your books up on the shelf.
Yeah, very good. We've got the whole series up there almost.
Well, you're missing MREA, but other than that.
Oh, I probably had to give that to someone.
Yeah, you probably did.
Well, it's funny that you point to that because I do want to, it's not often we get to sit with one of the authors of the series from which, the company that's changed all of our lives. And this isn't a KW podcast, but it's a big part of the industry. Right. I mean, these books they revolutionized the industry. And so how did you get involved with, you were pretty much involved with almost every book in some way, shape, or form. So could you just share with us like how that kind of came to be?
So when I joined Keller Williams, it was 1997, 98 when it came, and we got into a mastermind. And because we were making lots of money, the name of the mastermind was called Wealth Building Mastermind. And we would go, when I say we, there was about 12 of us, that would go to Austin, Texas for 2 days, 4 times a year to be in a hotel room with Gary Keller as Gary was running this mastermind with us. And after a little more than a year, when we're going, do you have a buyer's agent? How much do you pay yourself? I have a showing agent. Do you have a showing agent? How do you build? And Gary stood in front of us and he said, you guys are just really good at what you do, but you don't know squat about business. Okay. And so he turned our mastermind into a study group and then took all of his people at Keller Williams University and sent them out to find who's making more than $1 million a year in commission income and what are they doing. And so that's how that book came together. It's like, what are the best practices for the people that are making more than $1 million a year? There was 52 of them. There's a bunch of bios in the back. And so then they synthesized it down into the models and said, well, here's the models that you need to follow if you're going to build a large organization. At the same time, my personal experience went from I'm selling 8 to 10 houses a month and I'm at the top of the Phoenix industry, but I'm working 24/7. As my first 18 months in coming into a different environment where I'm being mentored by Gary Keller and I'm in with other top producing agents. And by the way, Gary said masterminds would never be more than 20 people.
They're a little different today.
Yeah, we know that, right? So anyway, that changed me, and now I'm doing 20 transactions, but I'm not working weekends anymore, and I'm not working only Thursday night. The rest of the time, I've got freedom. I'm making way more money because I'm implementing what we're learning in the masterminds. So I was telling you that Dave Jenks, who is Gary's partner in doing all of this, he and I were at a Diamondbacks game, and we're talking, and he said, well, there's an outlier in the back of that book. Her name is Christina Martinez. So a couple statistics for you. 1,920 people was the average size of a database for somebody making more than $1 million a year, right? So call it 2,000 people. Christina Martinez's database was only 400 people, and she made $4 million that year. So Gary and Dave got together and said, she's the outlier. How can we help our agents at Keller Williams do what Christina Martinez did? And with a smaller database, but a specific one. So that's where the blue book, we call it, the Millionaire Real Estate Investor book came. Because actually their intention was How to Buy Your First Home was going to be the next book.
Interesting. Before we get into that next book, because
okay.
this is there's a progression here that I love. I just want to comment on the outlier real quick. We were just listening, and actually all of us were listening to Sean Acor at Family Reunion, and it was interesting because he mentioned how in most psychology, science, education, business, we're taught to revert to the mean, right, the average, and we throw out the outliers. But how insightful to actually pick up on the outlier and say, that's actually who we should be studying, and we should actually figure that out.
Right.
Because how did she do that with 400? And I think right now it's a very pertinent conversation for real estate agents because so many of us have been in full-blown build the database, build the database, build the database, build the database. And I'm not saying we move away from that. We definitely should. However, I think where a lot of our agents can use some more work is in the segmenting of that database to go deeper with a smaller percentage of the database.
100%.
Would you agree?
Yes, 100%, because that also allows you to be specific with your conversation. So, we talked about the fact that I do fierce conversation workshops. And the fundamental transformational idea is that the conversation is the relationship. Okay? So if your conversation is Facebook or Instagram, look how wonderful my family is, that's not resonating with the investor. So if your database is segmented so that you can be appropriate with the conversation with the investor, bring in opportunities, bring in education, bring in the information that they need, it's critical.
Yeah. The conversation is the relationship.
Right.
And there's some of that, that conversation where when we talk about database size and automation and things like that, that's where we have to be careful with automation because sometimes we miss the biggest piece of a conversation or relationship, which is the nonverbal. It's the inflection. It's the stuff that you can't get sometimes in the automation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go back into the books because MREI was built out of that conversation right there. And so what is that book all about? And can you keep going with that story? Yeah.
It's a Millionaire Real Estate. So the idea of that book is if you're going, first of all, there's 4 types of people that are at least potential investors. Number 1 is the observer. They don't do anything, but they watch other people. Number 2 is the speculator and the person that's betting on the future. Number 3 is the collector. Okay, look at how pretty this one is that I have. And number 4 is the investor. And the investor is looking and saying, if I'm going to put my money someplace, then where am I going to get my best return on investment? And if real estate is the vehicle that you're going to choose, then here's how you do real estate, and here's the advantage of real estate. And so the Millionaire Real Estate Investor goes through that. When I talked to Gary Keller about it, and he was writing, the first part of the book is how you think. And if you know Gary Keller, that's always right, the first part of everything, right?
Yeah.
And he told me, he goes, his son John was 13 at the time, and he said, I wrote in the first part of that book everything I wanted my son John to know about money. And so it starts in how you think, and then, right, kind of like cash flow quadrant too. Yeah. So anyway, that's how that got started. And then here's what you do. And then for Keller Williams agents, there was a PowerPoint that was created, and there were posters and flyers and stuff like that so that you could use that book to grow and build your database and build that conversation with your investor database.
And that was the conversation that you were having with your clients as you really became this wealth advisor,
right,
so to speak. And then at what point did your book then come along, Hold?
We were, Hold is, it's an interesting title, right? Because it doesn't say real estate. So it's the tagline on how to build wealth, how to find the properties, and Hold was about. It's a story rather than just the technology. It's a series of stories. Jimmy and Linda McKissick and their story when they went from bankruptcy to being multimillionaires, and now they just bought their own Learjet, or I guess it's a Gulfstream.
Wow! So yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
wow. Linda, I'm going to have you on the podcast if you give us a ride.
She is. I have learned so much from that woman. Starting from the original 12 people in Mastermind, I watched the light bulbs go on over her head, and I would learn from her light bulb. So it's like, oh, she's awesome. So anyway, we wrote Hold to be able for the real estate agents to give to their clients. Okay. Yeah, we want you to read the book. Yeah, we want you to know and understand how do you buy real estate? How do you find the properties? How do you buy them right? How do you manage them right? And then at the end of the book is like, oh, how do you manage to the goal? So we're back to vision again. All right. What is it you want to achieve to these things? So that's what we talked about in the book. And my thought process is every real estate agent should be giving that book to their client and should be saying, here, read this book. If this is something you'd like to do for you and your family, let me know. Let's talk about how to make that work. So it's supposed to be a gift to give to the clients. And so, and we teach this all over the United States. So the first thing we teach is who do you need to be as an agent in order to be a trusted advisor for your client, so that you can stand toe to toe with the lawyer and the attorney and the CPA and all of the other people that are a part of their team, and come and defend this as an opportunity for them, or their financial advisor. You can walk in with a financial advisor and say, so who do you need? What skills do you need to have, and who do you need to be the trusted advisor? And then we do an evening seminar, and the evening seminar is bring your agents. This was a national bestseller, this book. So bring your clients. I said agents, didn't I?
No, we knew what you meant.
Okay.
Clients.
So bring your clients and come in here. And basically all we're doing is we're showing them how and why real estate is probably the vehicle that they're going to want to choose. And, oh, by the way, that's why your agent brought you here. And so we have one guy, we did it in Anchorage, Alaska, and they brought so many clients in that they had to move it to the University Theater. And one guy did 25 transactions in the next few months with his clients because they came and said, can you help me do that?
Right. It's no secret that David and I are super passionate about investing in real estate and all the reasons why. And I love this whole conversation because you're really taking what professionals know and making it more accessible to the everyday consumer.
Right.
Why aren't our friends and family and buyers and sellers being better informed about the benefits of investing in real estate, even in this market? Because would you agree there's no wrong time to buy the right deal? And so it's just a matter of finding those deals and understanding the mechanics of calculating the numbers. So I guess my question would be, what information, what skills you mentioned does a real estate agent have to start having these conversations, especially if they feel like maybe they understand the real estate transactional process, but they're not savvy investors themselves yet? So how do you bridge the gap between them having these conversations with their clients?
That's real easy. The issue is knowing and understanding return on investment. And that's where most people are putting their money into 401ks and that kind of thing, and they don't even know what the ROI is on their 401k. We don't know and understand the principles of money or the tools of money because we haven't been taught. So if the agent is the vehicle for the education, and the agent doesn't need to know, they just need to have that on their team.
Right.
That's why Janice and I come and we do these seminars. Bring your people to come to the seminars. We'll be the ones to do the education for you. We'll be the ones to bring the information they need. And now your job is go out and find the opportunities. Just bring them an opportunity that they would say yes to.
Yeah. So really your job in a lot of ways just becomes to be the connector.
Yeah. And part of other people's teams. It's a win-win situation because I'm helping them build their business while they're helping me build mine.
Now, in your experience, how has this changed the relationship with your database, where you're not just asking them, hey, how can I get the next commission check out of you, but you're asking them, how can I help you build investments for your future family? How does that compound in business over years?
Well, 100%. So if we go all the way back to Christina Martinez, here she is helping her clients grow and build wealth. How? Because she's helping them buy properties with a positive cash flow that the typical real estate agent takes you up to your debt to income ratio.
Right.
And now you can't qualify to buy anything else.
Right.
And she's creating positive cash flow for people so they're more enabled to buy others.
Right. She's setting them up to be able to buy more investment properties.
Exactly. And and I don't know this for certain, but if I were in her shoes, I would do this. There are people that have, each one of us has limited capacity, right? But you and I together might have more capacity. So bringing people together into an opportunity that maybe they couldn't have on their own, but they can have. And now if we're looking at ROI, 50% of the same ROI is same ROI. And people aren't thinking about, I can't afford to buy one. Well, what if you, and one more thing that I teach in this seminar is that we have a multi-generational issue going on right now. The older generation, my dad's generation, including mine, and I'm going to be 70 in a couple of months, including my generation, we were told to get a good job, get a good pension, and pay off your house so that you could get the pension and you could live okay. Okay. Many years ago, real estate industry, NAR, did a survey, and they found out that 90% of real estate agents retire to a lower standard of living. 90% retired. Is that what anybody wants?
What a missed opportunity.
Exactly. So, so we're helping people think bigger, think differently, coming together to make things happen. And I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, you absolutely did.
Okay, all right.
You absolutely did. The education just then compounds, and if they want to do, I mean, you used an example of, well, not only are you getting more sales from education and creating cash flow, but then you can pop up your own property management company to service the income properties that your clients are buying.
Yep.
And that's when we start talking about the synergy lines between ancillary businesses, all of which one person can own.
Right.
Or have at least ownership in.
And I'm going to tell you that the property management business is the problem side of the business. Okay. And one of the challenges that we experienced in doing that, so I'm going back to the who, not the what, right? If I didn't have Janice, I wouldn't be in the property management business, because the minute that my client experiences a bad tenant and I'm the property manager, what happened to my investor client?
Yeah.
Relationship's
Good
broken.
point.
Yeah.
Relationship is broken. And so it's really, I believe that real estate agents have such an enormous opportunity to build a multi-million-dollar business if they choose to go there and go all the way to the 7th level, that the man that chases two rabbits catches neither. And so it's have the property management company as part of your team.
Yeah.
Because if you need to fire your property manager, you can do that without losing your client. Same with the lawyer, same with the CPA, same with the financial advisor.
Definitely.
You know,
you keep using this word, Steve, opportunity, and you know, it for whatever reason, when you're talking about this, I was just reading something from Brandon Turner, and a lot of people out there in the investing and real estate world will know Brandon from Bigger Pockets and Open Door Capital and all that. And he was talking about just his mindset shift around raising capital, because that's a big piece of bringing other people in and talking to the attorney and the lawyer and the doctor and all that stuff. And he was talking about how he would tell his performance coach, I can't raise capital, I don't like it, it's hard, it's difficult. But then he shifted into, hey, I am creating an opportunity that I understand at a higher level for others to come in with me to own something bigger and to stack that potential in a big project. And I just thought that was pertinent, because I heard it just the other day talking about, well, I don't have the money to get into this. Well, you have something. You have a relationship, you have the knowledge, you have the hustle, you have time, you have something that can contribute to a big opportunity. So don't be one-dimensional as you think about building wealth for you or your clients.
So what I just heard you say is, and I'm just going to give my interpretation on your little anecdote there, right, is that his vision had to change, and his acceptance of his role in making it happen changed. And it's the same thing with real estate agents. If you don't have an organizational chart or a vision for where this is going and clarity on the role. So my example for myself was, I was a listing agent on my team, and I thought that was my role. And we didn't have MREA at the time. And so we came across, we'd done 240 transactions. There was only me, my buyer's agent, and a showing assistant, and our transaction coordinator. We'd done 243 transactions. My buyer's agent said, I want to be the listing agent. And I'm like, well, that's my job. What am I going to do? And I didn't have a vision big enough, and he left. And so my vision wasn't big enough to include his, and I didn't know how. And again, if I'd had the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, there would be a different situation. This is prior to the book. So when you're talking about Brandon, you're looking and you're saying, oh, his vision was, I can't, or I don't, or I won't, whatever it is. Once he changed his vision and changed what he believed his role was, then his opportunity changed.
Well, and that's just such a relevant message to anybody out there that's a CEO or owner of their own business, in whatever business vertical that happens to be in.
Right.
Having a big enough vision for the business so that talented people who join you don't have to leave you to take their most logical next step in growth.
100%. And that's what we teach in our leverage courses, right?
Now, if you don't mind me asking, Steve, how have you been able to personally, other than the commissions from the sales and the income from the management, have you decided to personally invest in real estate alongside some of your clients? What did that look like over time as a progression?
I have with my clients and with Janice, my business partner, and with my employees and with my contracted people. Yeah. You know what's interesting is I was involved in a commercial investment. The guy who brought the deal to the table got 25% of the deal for bringing it to the table. And I'm like, oh. Well, all you have to do is, if you can get the other 75% of the people get the return on investment that they're looking for,
right?
And they're going to come up with the capital because they're getting the ROI, but you're going to get a free 25% just for bringing the deal to the table,
right?
Okay. Oh, well, let's bring this back to the real estate agent. All you have to do is bring the deal to the table.
Yeah.
So our commissions are negotiable, and we're all over the place on the commissions. But I brought deals to the table where I get a 20% commission.
Wow, okay. That's a hell of a commission.
Right. And so as long as the seller's willing to accept what's going on, the buyers are willing to accept what's going on, I'm bringing a deal together because I know and understand return on investment,
right?
And I can attract money into it. You want to invest in this, you're going to make 20 to 25%. Really?
Any other best practices as it pertains to joint ventures and partnerships in the real estate ownership space?
Yeah, be careful. Watch out.
Yeah.
Trust is a huge thing.
Right.
And so if you're chasing the money, you have a tendency to get in bed with people that are chasing the money, and it's not about the relationship. Okay? And so if the relationship's more important than the money, then that's a different deal. Joint ventures and those kind of things, the typical conventional wisdom is they don't work.
How do you
guys, I can see your wheels spinning right now.
Yeah.
So like how would you advise people that do want to step into a joint venture partnerships? Like, what are some of the ways that they can determine whether or not, hey, this person's more in it for the money than the relationship?
Well, so one of the things, that's what lawyers do, and they protect us from that kind of stuff. And so you have an LLC with an operating agreement and all of those kinds, which outline the relationship and what that's going to look like. When you talk in joint ventures, so for example, I have a joint venture with a title company right now, which we have gone through really, really difficult times. And we've also gone through really, really good times. And we're continuing to go through the good times right now. When you go through the difficult times, you find out who you're in business with. And if somebody's going to get in the foxhole with you and fight the war, it's like, okay, this is really cool. Other people will bail out, or other people will, frankly, I was involved in an investment with a family, and the sons and daughters were suing the mom and dad over the investment that went bad. So I don't have a perfect answer for you. The lawyers figure out how to make, but the lawyers will also figure out how to make money to sue against the agreement they created.
Oh, geez.
That's a topic for the next episode.
Right,
yes.
right.
I don't mean to step back in the story like too far, and we don't have too much time left, unfortunately, but I do want to go back into that like original room, the mastermind, because it seems like everyone these days sets up a mastermind or a meetup group or whatever. And I just want, as someone who sat in a room with a dozen other people who frankly are all multimillionaires who we all look up to in this industry, with a billionaire who is starting a company that became what is now the #1 company in the world. Like, what was it about that mastermind that made it like just magic? Do you remember anything from that you just be like, man, to make a mastermind really work, it should have what?
So, a couple things. First of all, Napoleon Hill was the guy who identified mastermind as a concept.
Like Think and Grow Rich, right?
And Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
And he also identified the process for a mastermind. So a couple things happened. The first one was the topic. right? So it started out as Wealth Building Mastermind. The premise was you're making more than your parents who taught you what to do with money. And so Gary was bringing to us relationships with people that talked about family trusts and protecting assets and all of that kind of stuff. But our conversation shifted, as I told you, to what are you doing in your business and how are you leveraging and what's your organization look like and all of that. And so it shifted from the topic of wealth building to business building. In the business building part, we had to come to the meetings with our P&Ls. And we found out that the P&Ls were all categorized differently. And so I'm putting this money into advertising, but you're putting it into something else. And so we couldn't relate the P&Ls together. So hence in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, right, here's the chart of accounts. That's where that came from. And so said we can't do any comparison unless we have so that's what happened.
Apples to apples.
Yep. And so now our conversation is on a topic around, and it went in all kinds of different directions, but we came prepared to talk about a specific topic. We were prepared to give our P&L to the other person on the mastermind, to be transparent with the other people, and to learn from each other. And so a couple things. Number one, you need a leader in the mastermind. Somebody has to moderate and lead the mastermind. It can't just be a free-for-all conversation. Number two, people have to come prepared to have a conversation around a specific topic. Otherwise, there's no reason for them to be there. This is not a takers group. This is a giving group. And then number four is, because I've been in masterminds with takers, and it causes the givers to not want to give. So, and then the other one is time and time off. So we spent 2 days in the hotel room with Gary talking about our topic and what was going on with the topic. And by the way, Gary started every one of them. He was just a moderator. He wasn't there to teach and train, except his question was, so what's going on? So it was our conversation. We had come prepared for a conversation, but it was our conversation that was. And then we would go over to somebody's house afterwards. Althea Osborne is her name. Okay, and we would hang out at Althea's house, and there was, I would bet pretty much everybody that went to Althea's house said the magic happened at Althea's house. Here's all the conversation. Now it's like, okay, we're synthesizing, talking, having a beer,
working through all the details, letting it all out.
Yeah. And the relationships went deep that way.
That's really good advice for just agents who are seeking to attach themselves to something, for brokerages who are putting these types of things together. I appreciate you going there. And man, I could spend all day talking about all these different subjects. I know we're only scratching the surface, but I want to be respectful of your time. I want to transition us into the last segment of our show. Okay. 3, 2, 1, action. It's the same 3 questions we ask every guest. You're in the hot seat at Studio K. You ready for this?
I'm ready for this.
Okay, all right.
We'll see if I'm ready.
Question number 1, who is the one person that has had the biggest influence on your business and why?
Gary Keller. And Gary Keller changed my thought process about myself. So I need to answer this quickly. I lost my team because my vision wasn't big enough and I didn't know where I was going to go, so I became the ceiling of achievement for the people on the team. Gary said to me, so what do you need to learn? And I'm having a pity party with him, and I'm going, well, I guess I got to learn to create right now. It took me 20 years to create in the first place. And he goes, so what do you need to learn? Well, I guess I got a career visioning. And he goes, well, go and teach it. And I said, Gary, you don't understand. I can't teach. I lose my, and I can't. And so he says, so what do you need to learn?
That's my new favorite question. Everyone's getting that question today.
There you go. And so he put me in front of 250 people in Houston, Texas for a 3 full day seminar. Is that somebody we know?
I don't know. Maybe Gary Keller's calling in.
Yep. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. So sorry.
We cut you up. So, Gary Keller.
Yep.
Clearly. Awesome. Question number 2, what book has been most impactful on your business and why?
I'm going to say my business and my life. So first of all, because I was part of Millionaire Real Estate Agent and Millionaire Real Estate Investor and Hold, because I was part of that process, it's obviously big impact. But when I'm looking at a broader spectrum, it's the cash flow quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki. And I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it was like, that's cool. And he was a speaker for us at Keller Williams. And I'm like, that's awesome. And played the cash flow game and played it 15 times that first year, because I learned that's like training you how to think about money. But the cash flow quadrant just brought it all together. And it was like, I was huge.
Awesome.
All right, Steve, as you know, this is the All In Podcast where we encourage our listeners to take what they've heard here today and go put it into action. So what's the one thing that our listeners should go do today to begin building wealth for themselves and for their customers and clients?
Okay, I'm going to answer that question very, very fast, but I'm going to go deep. Life includes 5 circles: spiritual, personal, family, financial, and business or community. Life includes 5 circles. So what would the perfect life look like? Abundance in all 5 circles. So when somebody is looking to build something for themselves in their lives, if you don't know what your vision is for abundance spiritually, personally, family-wise, financially, and business-wise, how can you create a business plan?
Right.
So I'm going to suggest that the most important thing they could do is start looking and saying, what is my vision? Because we talk about goals in this business all the time, and goals are just markers on the way to the vision.
Right.
And so it's like, well, what is my vision? One, is it compelling? Because if it's not compelling, you won't blow through the difficulties.
Right. The quality of the questions we ask ourselves lead to the quality of answers we get.
100%.
I think that's an entire series of episodes that we just boiled into one quick question. That was awesome. I love it. Steve, people want to learn more from you, about you, get connected to your business, maybe interested in real estate here in this market. Where can people find you and connect with you?
Oh, my email's simple. It's Steve Chader, that's C-H-A-D as in David, E-R, at KW.com, right? Happy to have them call me on the phone, 602-697-6303.
That's it. That's awesome. Again, I say this probably every 5th, 6th episode, guys, but you're getting personal phone numbers and emails from some of the best minds in real estate across the country. I hope you don't take that for granted. Reach out. Thanks, Steve, for his time. Steve, thank you for spending some time with us. It's been a lot of fun. I love that you're right in our backyard and that you're a partner of ours. And hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Hey, anytime. Happy to do it. Thank you, guys. You know what? I'm going to throw it back at you because you're adding so much value to the real estate industry. And Eleanor Roosevelt said, great minds talk about ideas, average minds talk about events, and small minds talk about people. And you guys are talking about ideas, bringing the ideas to the table for others. So that's awesome.
Well, that's really encouraging.
Appreciate that. Absolutely. Thank you.
Guys, this has been another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.